Hello ladies, in this video we're going to look at converting decimals into fractions and also converting decimals into percentages. So we're looking at exercise 6G and 6H from your textbook. All right, so we're not doing every single question. I've just chosen a few that will cover the concepts well. Do remember that your textbook does have video examples and walkthroughs that are also helpful, but hopefully this video will be just as powerful I just read the word power, just as helpful as the Cambridge resources are. Okay, so question 5, convert the following fractions to decimals by first changing the fraction to an equivalent fraction whose denominator is a power of 10. So the reason for doing a power of 10 will become obvious soon, but basically, is my pen working? Powers of 10, we've got 10, we have 100, we have 1,000, and so on. So it all depends on what your numerator is too. So you can see here, we've just got one digit. So we're going to write it over 4 tenths. So let me just go A 4 over 5. So we're going to change that to something over 10. Okay, so remember we have to do it to a power of 10. So because we're just working with single digits, I'm just going to do 10. When we're dealing with 2 digits, I'm going to do it over the power of 100. Okay, and if you're working with 3 digits, you can work with over 1,000. Now, sometimes you can simplify them by not necessarily making the denominator larger. You can do it by making the denominator smaller, but all these examples, we're going to be making the denominator either over 10, 100, or, well, I don't think any are over 1,000, so just 10 or 100. Okay, so when we're doing equivalent fractions, let me just get my red pen. We got to say, all right, how did I get to that 10? What did I multiply 5 by to get to 10? I multiplied it by 2. So whatever I do to the bottom, I also have to do to the top. Okay, so 5 times 2 gives me 10. So 4 times 2 gives me 8. So that means I've got 8 tenths. And the reason we're doing that is because I can then write it as a decimal. And there's 8 tenths. So in the tenths column, for place value, we have the number 8. Okay, let's do question B. We'll do B over here. Now, half you probably already know is 0.5, but let's just do the working out. So we're just going to do it over 10. The reason for that, if we did 100, you're going to have zeros at the end, which is what we don't usually write decimals like that. So what do we multiply the 2 by to get to 10? We multiply it by 5. And whatever we do to the top, we do to the bottom. So I'm going to multiply that by 5 as well. So my numerator is going to be 5. So I've got 5 tenths, so I'm going to write 5 in the tenths column. Okay, I'm going to skip and do, actually I'll do C. I'm not going to skip it. 7/20. Now you might think, oh, I can do divided by 10, and that's true, you could, but we're going to multiply by powers of 10. So I'm going to do that to 100. So what do I multiply 20 by to get to 100? Multiply it by 5, and kind of running out of room there, so it's times 5. Don't get confused with the previous question. Okay, so 7 times 5 is 35. So that means I've got 0.35 or 35 hundredths. And we can do D, 23 over 50. All right, I'm going to do it all over 100. So what do I multiply 50 by to get to 100? I multiply it by 2. So I do the same to the top. So 23 times 2 is 46. So I'm going to have 0.46 or 46 hundredths. Okay, I'm going to skip E and just move on to question 3 because we have a mixed number. Sorry, did I say F? I can't. Sometimes I don't even know what I say. Okay, we got 3 1/4. So if we're doing this as a decimal, obviously we've got a whole number here. So that 3 is going to stay, but it's only this quarter I need to change over 10. Okay, so if you just ignore that 3 for now, and you're probably thinking, oh, I can't do multiply 4 to get by 10. Well, you can multiply it by a fraction, but if that's too hard, just make it 100. Okay, so 4 times what gives you 100? 4 times 25. And whatever you do to the bottom, you do to the top. So we're going to have 3 25 hundredths. So it's going to be 3.25. Okay, so we've got our whole number and we've got our fractional part. All right, G is an improper fraction, so we'll do that one as well. Now, if you want, you can convert it into a mixed number first, or you can convert it at the end. I think it would be easier to convert now. So 5 over 2 is the same as 2.5. I'm going to write it as a fraction because we need to learn how to, whoops, wasn't meant to do that one there. Let me just rub that out. So even though you probably know the answer, sometimes just doing the process helps cement it. Okay, so what do we multiply that 2 by to get to 10? We multiply it by 5, and we do the same to the top. Let me just go back. So 1 times 5 is 5. So you've got 2.5. So 2 whole numbers and 2 units or 2 ones and 5 tenths. 5 tenths. All right. I'm going to move on to the next question. Convert the following fractions to decimals by dividing the numerator by the denominator. So this is another way we can do it. So using division, because this is effectively what it is. So 2 goes into 1. All right, so does 2 go into 1? No. So we put a 0. And there is a decimal there. We don't usually write it, but we need to put it in because we need to keep adding zeros. So as soon as we put a decimal down the bottom, we need to put it also up the top. And then we add a 0. Okay, so does 2 go into, well, I'm going to put the 1 there. 2 go into 10? Yes. How many times? 5 times. So we've got 0.5. I'm going to skip the next one because it's a little bit easier. So I'm going to do C. 3/4. So we're doing 4 into 3. 4 doesn't go into 3, so I write 0. And I'm going to put my decimal there and follow my decimal up the top. Add your 0, and the 3 is your remainder. So 4 goes into 3. What is that? 7 times with 2 remaining. So 4 times 7 is 28. We've got 2 left over. Add the 0. 4 goes into 25 times. So 3/4 is the same as 0.75. Let's do D. So 5 into 2 doesn't go in, so put a 0, put your decimals in, add your 0, and we had a 2 remaining before, so 5 goes into 24 times. All right, let's do E. All right, question E, we're doing 3 into 1. So how many times does 3 go into 1? It goes into 1 0 times. Add your 0, put your 1 up. How many times does 3 go into 10? It goes into 3 times. 1 remaining, add your 0. 3 goes into 10. And if you didn't know already, we're going to have 0.33 333. It's going to keep recurring. So you can write that as 0.3. Okay, so 0.3 with a little dot on the top will just indicate that that 3 continues. All right, let's do F. Okay, so we're doing 8 goes into 3. So we go 0, add your 0. So we've got 8 into 30. Oh, what is that? 3 times? 6 remaining. So then 8 goes into 60 7 times. And then 8 goes into 45 times. So you really need to know your multiplications, girls, and your mental maths. That's why I'm working a bit slowly. I'm doing it all in my head. And then you can do G and H. Might just do it because we can. Okay, so we've got 12 going into 5. Okay, so 12 doesn't go into 5, so I'm going to put 0. 12 goes into 50 4 times. 2 remaining. Goes into 20 once with 8 remaining. 5 6 times with 8 remaining. So it's going to keep being 6. Okay, so we've got 0.416666, and it looks like it's going to keep going. So we write that as 0.416 with the 6 recurring. And then let's just write H down here. So we've got 7 into 3, 0, add your decimal. 7 goes into 34 times. 7 goes into 20 twice. 7 goes into 68 times. Just trying to do the maths in my head. Goes into 45 times. 7 goes into 57 times. And we're going to keep going. Okay, so I might just leave it there. Actually, girls, I'm going to keep going. I just wanted to check my answer on the calculator, and I think it's probably a good idea for me to show you how to write this, because it's actually going to keep recurring. So let's just go. Okay, so what have we got remaining? 3. So 4. So basically, girls, if we kept going, this pattern is going to repeat. Okay, so those numbers, we've got 0.428571. They're all going to repeat. Okay, so there's a pattern there. You can write this to indicate that it keeps going, either with a line over the top like that, or you can write it with 2 dots, so starting here and here. So you're going to keep repeating from those, from the number 4 to the number 1. So then it's going to keep going. 428571, 428571, and so on. So either using the line or the 2 dots to indicate that. All right, let's look at question 7. Okay, so completing these fraction decimal tables, the quarters table has been done for you. It's well worth trying to memorize these fractions and their equivalent decimal values. I put this on here because I strongly agree. You should know their equivalent. So a quarter is equal to 0.5. So if we've got, not a quarter, sorry, a half is equal to 0.5. And every time we go up, we're going up by 0.5. Okay, so all we're doing is multiplying the 0.5 by whatever the numerator is. And you can kind of see that with our quarters. So if we were doing a third, obviously 0 divided by anything is just 0, so I'm not putting that on there. But we've got 1/3 is equal to 0.3 recurring. 2/3 is 2 times that, which is going to be 0.6 recurring. And then we've got 3/3, which is 1. And then you can keep going. With fifths, 1/5 is equal to 0.2. And then 2/5 is just doubling that. So 2 times 0.2 is 0.4. 3/5, multiplying 0.2 by 3, which is 0.6. 4/5 is 0.8. And then obviously 5/5 is 1. So these fractions, girls, you need to know, including the quarters, okay? Not just for maths, year 7 maths, but oh my God, when you go shopping, it comes in very helpful. So if something was like 25% off, then you need to be able to understand what that actually means. But you use fraction in other situations, not when something is on sale. Okay, let's move on to 6H. So express the following percentages as decimals. So let me just write 2A. We have 32%. Now, percentages are just a proportion of 100. So that's what percentages mean, okay? So 32% can be written as, well, 32 out of 100. Now, if we're going to write that as a decimal, that's 32 hundredths, so it's 0.32. Okay, so it's quite a good idea to go from from percentages to fractions and then to your decimal. Okay, so understanding that we're dividing that by 100, or 32% is out of 100. So if we're doing, let's do E. Okay, so remember that's 6 out of 100. So that's 6 hundredths. Okay, so we just write it as 0.06. Okay, so it's 6 hundredths. I think I've got one that is, so let's do I. Do it over here. So at 218%. So you can still write that over 100. And when you think about that, we've got 100 goes into 200 2 times, and then we're left with 18 over 100. And if we're writing that as a decimal, it's 2.18. So 18 hundredths, but we don't usually say that. It's not good math talk, I guess. And then J, very similar. So we've got 142%. So we're going to write that as 142 over 100. Now we've got 1 full 100 can fit into that, and then we've got 42 left over. So we've got 1 and 42 hundredths, so 1.42. I don't think I need to do any more because they're all pretty much the same there. So let's move on to the next question. All right, express the following percentages as decimals. So now we can do it the same way. Okay, but I'm going to, if you get confused with this decimal point, I'm going to explain how we can overcome that. So before we were writing it as 22.5 over 100, okay, because effectively that's what it is. Now you can either rewrite that to be 225 over 1,000. So that means you're going to write 0.225, so 225 thousandths. Or you can say, well, 22.5 17.5 divided by 100 means we're going to be moving this decimal place 2 places to the left. So we've got 2 zeros here. This decimal place is going to be moved to here. So when we did I was going to say decimals in chapter 6, but we're still in chapter 6. I think it was 6C, multiplying and dividing by powers of 10. You learnt this method. Okay, so you decide what suits you. Either putting it as a whole number on the numerator, so multiplying everything by 10 will give you 225 over 1,000, or you can move your decimal place similar to what we did in 6C, I think. So let's do another one. So let's do 17.5%. Okay, so 17.5 over 100. Now, I don't really have a preference. I think if you're used to place value, then this first method might make more sense because you got 175 thousandths. So we write that as 0.175. But if you want to use the other method, 17.5 divided by 100. So we're going to move our decimal place 2 spots to the left to here. So it's going to become 0.175. Okay, you choose which method suits you. So I'm going to do a harder one now. Let's look at E. E looks pretty hard, and I've got to just scroll up so I can still see it on the screen. So let's have a look at question E. So I've got 112.35%. And I'm just going to scroll up again so I've got a bit more space. Okay, this is where the second method is probably easier, and I'll show you in a sec. So if we're writing that as a percentage, we're going to be writing it over 100. Now you can put this all over 10,000, but then it just becomes quite messy. And we're also dealing with, we can also put 100 into 112. So if I rewrote this as 1, okay, so 100 does go into 112, so 1, and then our remainder is 12.35 over 100. Okay, so I'm just going to put that over 10,000. So now I've got 1.1235, but I think it's easier to do this other method, the second method. So we're dividing by 100. So my decimal place is moving 1, 2, and it's coming here. Okay, so then I'm left with 1.1235. So see how that second method in this case is probably a lot more straightforward than the first method, but then again, you choose what suits you. Okay, but I think the second method there is a lot more straightforward. Okay, let's have a look at J. So 0.025%. Oh, so I'm not going to forget it. Is it 1 0 or 2 zeros? 1 0. Okay. So again, this the second method is probably the best, even though it's over 100, and you need to remember that percentages are like that, but I'm going to write it as 0.025 divided by 100. So I'm going to be moving my decimal place 2 spots to the left. And when there's no 0 there, you just add 1 in. And I'm just doing it a bit tight because I wrote it too close there. So I've got my decimal point here. So I'm going to write 0 point, and I added that 0 in there. You can see it's red, 0, 0. Whoops, I was going to write another decimal point. All right, so, oh gosh, no. Did I do that right? Let me just think. I needed 3 zeros, didn't I? I'm not seeing, because that's so close, I'm seeing that as a part of this. Okay, so we've got the decimal point has moved. So we've got 1, 2, 3 zeros to the right. So 0.00025. Okay, let's scroll back up. Let's have a look at the other two. All right, maybe we'll just do 1.04%. And what question was that? Okay. .04%. All right, so 1.04, we're dividing it by 100. So we're just going to move the decimal place 2 spots. So 1, add your 0, 2, put it in. So we're going to have 0.0104. Okay. Let's scroll on to question 4. So express the following decimals as percentages. All right, so remember percentages are out of 100. So before, when we were going from percentages to decimals, we were dividing by 100. When we're going the other way around, from decimals to percentages, we multiply by 100. So we're just going to multiply that by 100. So 0.8 times 100. I don't know why I just wrote it again, but when we multiply by 100, we're going to move the decimal place 2 spots. So I had 0.8, moving it 2 spots, 1, and add in a 0. So it goes here now. So it's going to be 80%. All right, question, let me do maybe, let's do E. 0.416. So I'm going to multiply that by 100. So remember, when I multiply by 100, my decimal point is going to move 2 places to the right. So we're going to have 41.6%. Let's just do one more. I might do K. So we've got 12.7. So again, we multiply that by 100, 12.7 times 100. I'm just going to scroll up a bit. So again, we move our decimal place 2 spots to the right. So we're going to have 1, 2, add your 0 in, it's going to go there. So 12.7% as a percentage is 1,270%. All right, and I'm just going to see if there's any more questions. No, we're done. All right, bye girls.